Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 167 of the Simpa Life Podcast. I am back. Been a long time. It was April last year since we last sat together, folks. What's a quick math on that? Jesus, that's 10 months. I've missed you. I hope you miss me too. It's been nice to watch my analytics continue to increase on various platforms, even though I've not posted anything in basically a year. So it's good to know that I've got some new listeners and the content is still meaningful and valuable, even when it's potentially out of date. When I decided to come back, there was only one guest really we could be coming back with, to be fair. I'm not really going to bother you too much with kind of the backstory of where I've been. You guys know obviously I've been working on sort of what is formerly the Hemp Garden Project, what is now Elvet Green in Durham. I'll get into kind of a bit more of the details because there are some similarities in terms of challenging local authorities and regulatory agencies and just authorities in general, really, which is kind of the raison d'etre of today's guest, who I'm going to jump straight into introducing now. Without further ado, they are the co-founder of the UK-based cannabis consultancy agency Hemp Hound, the host of Hemp Hound TV, and our resident CBD novel foods regulatory special correspondents. They are Cefyn Jones. How are you doing, brother?
I'm all good, sir. I like the kind of the intro. It almost kind of makes me feel a little bit important, whilst I know that people will be like, regulatory expert, novel foods. Is this going to be a riveting Simpa like welcome back episode? But certainly, I think with conversations that we've had, yes, all's been good, and it is great to see you back.
Oh, appreciate. Well, clearly you have not gone anywhere, which is good to see, brother. You've obviously been fighting the good fight. I guess, yeah, it's been a year. How fast these things move, they really do. I actually remember saying to you last January, I was like, we'll get you back on in a couple of months, once a few things sort of come to maturity in terms of complaints, etc. Obviously, in our kind of offline conversations, we've caught up a bit. But for kind of the audience at home, what sort of happened over the last 12 months? How doth the battle go?
Wow. It's an ongoing battle with lots of things. Hello, cat.
Actually, I suppose, sorry, just to interject for my audience, Neil sadly passed away in August last year after 17 and a half years. This is Morpheus, who's replaced him, and is finishing a naming convention that I started 20 years ago. So I had a black cat called Trinity 20-something years ago. Then I had Neo, Morpheus. That's the trilogy of the three main characters of the Matrix. But I sometimes end up calling him Morphine, because Morpheus, Morphine. But yeah, new cat.
Oh, the pairs are that good, are they?
Yeah. He's a good lad.
Oh, nice to meet you, Morpheus. Yeah, in regards to complaints, I can't really say much on that. There is a few things going on, but certainly with my wider complaint against the FSA's handling of novel foods and whatnot, I did actually have a bit of an update yesterday, which was kind of it took me aback, because we're talking about the investigation and highlighting of the potential of creation of a cartel market, undeclared conflicts of interest in academia when sitting on key regulatory panels. There's some really big things, and this is a complaint process that has been going on since 2022. It's 2026 now, and in about 2 months' time, the process will in effect be 4 years and going. But what happened was the complaint was escalated to the Parliamentary and Healthcare Service Ombudsman, right? And I needed to get an MP to sign off on that, which was good that I managed to kind of get Rebecca Smith MP, who is the South Hams MP. She looked at the issue that I presented to her. She was like, yeah, I agree, something's not right here. So I'll sign that letter and it'll go to the Parliamentary and Healthcare Service Ombudsman. All right. That was July last year. And I've kind of waited. I've gone through a holding pattern, and now I've just been introduced to a senior complex caseworker. That in itself is brilliant. But here's the craziness. I've been told that they cannot investigate the policy that surrounds the issues highlighted in my complaint. However, The issues highlighted in my complaint are around practices that are questionable and arguably there to protect policy. So I'm in a little bit of a 2 and 8 with that, far be it for me to drop too much occasional mockney rhyming slang. But yeah, in that respect, that's quite interesting. But the question you haven't asked, what's happening with the BBC, Kev?
That's my second question. That's my second question. What's happening with the BBC, Kevin?
Oh, okay then. Well, everyone in this industry knows something, right? And one of the things that a lot of people know is that there are uncertainties and questions surrounding Theresa May and Victoria Akins, right? Now, I'm not going to say whether they're founded or not, right? Because of course I am. I've done the research. They are founded. And it's not just the potentials of conflicts that were not declared that are questionable. However, right, one of the things that I noticed in 2018, because it was literally when I started working for the Cannabis Trades Association, and I started being a little bit more observant. We saw Theresa May, Victoria Akins highlighted. Victoria Akins had to recuse herself from talking about cannabis in an open parliamentary session when discussing drugs, and her portfolio was drugs and cannabis. So there was interest there, wide interest that is still often discussed today, right? Now, after doing a lot of research, I submitted a Freedom of Information request, an FOI request to the BBC, right? Because the reporting dropped off a cliff. All right, it was there, it was loud, it was in everyone's face, and then all of a sudden it was, Brexit, and I wonder if that was in part used as a smokescreen. But at the end of the day, when it comes to MPs having conflicts as big as they could potentially be with May and Akins, there should have been a continuance on the reporting, and there should have been some kind of inquiry, right? So we know that didn't happen. So last year, I decided I'm going to try and find out if the BBC were asked to stop reporting on the issue. I submitted an FOI. I kind of identified the issue. I kind of highlighted the wider concerns in a public interest context. What happened was the BBC came back to me and said, if we got this information, it's going to be withheld on the basis of journalism, art, and literature. It's known as the journalist derogation, all right? Journalism derogation. Now, in that response, they also said, that's where we leave it. You don't get an internal review. If you don't like it, you need to take it to the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO. So I escalated it to them. And basically, there was a situation where they asked the BBC if they're referring to that derogation. The BBC said yes. The ICO said, that's good enough for us. And it was like, hold on a second. That's a bit off. Now, there is precedent in this that had not been obliged. It's referred to as Sugar versus the ICO. And in that, it basically states that any information held for the purpose of journalism needs to be confirmed that it is not being held for any other context, such as admin or legal or whatnot. Because if it's held on those contexts, then it's not necessarily being held purely for journalism, and that information is then disclosable. Just in case, it doesn't kind of oblige any other exemption. All right. So I took this to tribunal, and the ruling has been given recently, although I believe it's not fully published at the moment. Just as I was getting it to tribunal, I was going through my own journey with someone who had submitted a subject access request to me. Specifically, it's Professor Günter Kohlm. Now, he's a person of interest in a lot of the investigative work that I do, not because he has issues himself, but because he comes from Reading University, which was key in the development of Epidiolex. And basically, he sits on regulatory panels, and I believe that he should declare the interests of his employer when he does so. That led to a situation where he accused me of potentially profiting from selling CBD gummies to kids, or from companies that did sell CBD gummies to kids, which was absolutely absurd because I come from a regulatory background. Is 18s and over. Anyone who benefits, there's an issue. So basically, because he did that, I complained to his employer, Reading, and he retaliated by submitting a subject access request, which I basically said, look, mate, all the information that I have on you is for the purpose of journalism. All of the information that I have on you has been published in article. So I'm sorry, but I can't help you. So the ICO came back and they were like, well, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. And they basically poo-pooed me on the journalism angle, right? And I was like, well, hold on. You've just turned around to the BBC and said you don't need to prove information, and yet here you are getting me to prove information. So what's the difference between a big broadcaster and an independent investigative journalist? So when I went to the tribunal, and I had that a couple of days after submitting my application, I then had to submit a form saying, oh, this is inconsistent behavior. You can't rule on one like that and one completely opposite. So I raised this with the judge, and the judge dismissed it. The judge also dismissed any kind of ruling or precedent on sugar versus the ICO, and he just basically said that the ICO were right to allow the BBC to rely on that derogation. Now, this is dangerous, and I have not just appealed to the tribunal, which they refused, but I've also appealed to the upper tribunal, because that's just how the process works. And, it's come down to one key question, right? And it has ramifications. Were the ICO lawful in allowing the BBC to rely on that derogation? And like the side question of that is, was the tribunal correct, or did they err in law in allowing the ICO to allow the BBC to rely on that derogation? Now, here's a big issue, right? The information that I was requesting, you would assume wouldn't go through journalists, would you, or whatnot? You would think it would go high up to someone, to say, can you stop reporting on that issue, please? Right? Is that a reporting issue? Yes, but we're also talking something bigger here, because the BBC had already highlighted the potential conflicts. There was an insane amount of noise. So if that information was there, and I say if because it's not been confirmed, but if there is communications from the government saying, can you stop reporting on this topic, please? Then the BBC are holding it on legal grounds, because it's reputational management, and it is also the cover-up of a serious conflict of interest issue, right? And I say issue because, again, it needs to go through a proper inquiry to be determined if there is an issue. And, we can all have our opinions, but it is ultimately the judge's final say. So, yes, that is intriguing, because it means that if I do not challenge this ruling, then every single broadcaster has got a way out of disclosing sensitive information, right? Now, I'm going to chuck a really, really modern kind of setting for this, right? Or at least more recent than 2018, on when communications may or may not have happened. CBD Novel Foods, the 10 milligram ADI, announced, when was it? October 2023, right? the FSA did not actively engage industry stakeholders to give them fair warning. What they did was they went to all of the major broadcasters from BBC right through to Cosmopolitan magazine and said, this is what's happening, right? That's a little bit crazy. So they do have that control and movement with the press. Right? Is there anything wrong in that? Well, I think in an industry sense, yes, because stakeholders should have been informed prior to that. But we've got an even more recent situation with the likes of BBC, Joe, Vice, everything scrummeting.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, right? To the point that I can tell you without a shadow of doubt in my mind that it is narrative fuel. Right? People are saying that, it's a new condition. No, it's not. It was being looked at in 1997 in Australia. And the main concern there was the ever-growing use of hydroponics, right? It's been looked at more recently. Interesting, Dr. Ethan Russo started highlighting it on it, I believe, in 2017. And if you check the patent register, I believe he's got a cure for it listed.
That's interesting. He's on my list for future guests, so that's something I'll definitely bring up.
I would love to talk to him.
We've already had a back and forth, so
because there's a wider issue here. There's a lot of people who believe that the reason why conditions like cannabis hypermesis syndrome are so prevalent in a lot of places other than the UK and the EU, and I say prevalent, I'm not saying non-existent, right, is because of the potential of using nasties like neem. And whatnot, and the plants not being flushed appropriately of all the toxins that then build up in you, and then next thing you know, you've got cyclical vomiting, and you need to go in a warm bath to stop that cyclical vomiting. You see the way that the press works. If we, the public, cannot engage with those press entities and find out what the government's been telling them, especially if it strays outside of the realm of journalistic derogation, then where's the transparency? And more importantly, who is and who is not a state a press company? Because if they're all just being fed stuff and they're just there happily protecting people who like, for example, the Mays and Aikens, that just leads there's no transparency there.
Yeah.
We need that transparency, and certainly if it's hiding people's interests or protecting people's reputations, we all see that. And if we've got that brick wall that we can't break through, that's really dodgy territory, which is obviously why I have to appeal to the upper tribunal in regards to the Jones versus ICO case, because if it was rubber stamped and it did become precedent, then it's a big loss for transparency, full stop.
No, 100%. There is a lot to kind of digest in that. I think what you're kind of touching on is something that, trying to think what room I was in. It was somewhere around 2018, 2017. And somebody speaking was basically stating that I don't think it was that guy. Although what I'm going to say, it probably sounds like the guy you're going to think of, but it's not. It wasn't that guy. The future of the cannabinoid industry is intrinsically tied up in sort of national security and the future of the country. That if you look at what's happening with cannabinoids versus cannabis, if you look at opioids versus opium, what happened with like the Pure Food and Drug Safety Act 1906, what happened with like the international opioid regulations and all of this stuff, and the war that was going on in the space, because at the same time you had opium dens, you then had just over-the-counter opioid medications, opium-derived medications, new synthetic opioids that were arriving on the market without any regulation. And it was the synthetics and all of the other stuff that were done as an attempt to patent that which couldn't be patented. Just the Somnifera poppy, you couldn't patent the poppy or the milk, or you could patent extraction techniques from it, which is where the early pharmacologists sort of came from. But then when they got in bed with the state, so then it became this thing of like the hatred against the Chinese nationals on the what's my geography, west coast of America, and the association of sort of East Asian traditions or Middle Eastern cultural traditions of consuming opium, when it was quite culturally adapted to the area. Yes, it was brought in by other communities, but people take drugs, so people took drugs. Do you know what I mean? And then obviously there'll have been at that time, the narrative started to become defined as doctors, white labs, court companies, good drugs, not them, bad drugs. And it became this way of just over time, altering the public's perception and understanding that not all drugs are bad. Drugs are bad if they're not given to you by the magic man, but if the magic man gives you it, you're safe. And so I imagine during the time of the Yellow Top Press, Hearst, William Randolph Hearst, and that in continental US and Canada, and that dominating the market for media, same sort of thing will happen. You saw with Jesus Christ, I haven't pulled any of this information out of my head in like a year, so you can see I'm having to dust the cobwebs off.
Reefer Madness?
Harry Anslinger, and kind of all the stories that were pushed, exactly all of that. That kind of started as this whoa, and then tapered into the same talking points. I think over time that system, and then through conglomeratization of media through the late 70s and early 80s, has meant that you only need to go to one or two of them. If the BBC reports it, Joe goes, the Beaver reporting, let's do our, do you know what I mean? And so I don't think you need to go to all of them. Because again, that your conspiracy, the more people you expose to it, the harder it becomes to control. BBC has long been alleged, and is, in my opinion, a national state broadcaster. We saw this with the way they went after Corbyn. We saw this with the way that they backed the Iraq War. We saw this with, name your fucking historical event for the past 40 years. Yeah. And then companies like ITV, etc., with them then being owned by, like, effectively through like branches of media like Murdoch, etc., these multi international billionaires, their class interest aligns. They don't need to know that the Beaver reporting on that. They are already working towards that. The people shouldn't be allowed that plant. It's dangerous. Scromiton comes along. Let's jump on that story because it perpetuates the narrative we want them to believe, that the plant is dangerous. We turn it into magic. You have to pay us to get access. It's the same as what happened with us moving from feudalism to proletariatism, effectively, is you had the land, you worked your own shit, and you kept your own shit. And then they came along and went, we own your land now, and actually you're not allowed to grow food. And if you want food, you've got to sell some of your labour for a magic token, and then the token can be exchanged for food. And it's just
I don't know, mate.
It's just them interjecting into it of being, it's capitalism basically. It's there's a way to put in a middleman to make money. They're putting it in, and so all these interests converge. And so yes, there are quite a few people in the know, but others just look at it and go, "Oh, we're robbing these lot. I'm in." Do you know what I mean? They don't need more detail. They're just like, how much money will I make? I trust you, Dave. We made loads, and that other time we fucked over those other people. Let's do it.
There's two things there. One, I wonder, like, is it just a case of Chinese whispers in the press? I don't know. I believe that something's going on, and I believe that is an attack on unlicensed cannabis. Right? I think that's one of the things that people don't like, and of course, those are the same people like the Daily Mail who will tell you cannabis will make you crazy after you've written the second N, but they will kind of literally recycle that. I'd love saying this. Every time I say it, my wife cringes. Like, they're so anti-cannabis, and yet every 2 to 3 months they'll recycle their story about how cannabis gives women a better orgasm. Like, it's just absolutely weird. But I do genuinely believe that there has been eyes on dismantling the unlicensed cannabis industry for some time. It's a stopgap. Right. And it will be basically there for all the conditions that aren't registered. And as cannabinoid research funding becomes available for condition X versus cannabinoid whatever, then basically clinicians will be advised to stop prescribing on the basis of that condition. And we already know that that has happened because when Victoria Aikins was made health secretary before the Tories lost the last election. Just at her appointment, the Home Office actually responded to the Home Affairs Committee's review on recreational drug use, which was more cannabis than anything else. But in that, even though it was about recreational use, it stated that the Home Office had advised clinicians to stop prescribing on the basis of chronic pain because there was R&D funding available for CBD versus that condition. All right.
That's exactly the same thing that happened with... It's not even a conspiracy. I'm going to put it down as what it is. When you look at it, the correlation between the press's campaign of backing all of the mums and their kids with epilepsy, intractable epilepsy and conditions that weren't responding to conventional treatments but were massively beneficial to cannabis, and then the dismantling of the domestic CBD industry. And it just switched, and like you said, and then suddenly the launch of Epidiolex, a CBD-based drug designed for usage in cases of intractable epilepsy. This is what I'm saying before. I agree. There is a conspiracy and there are people connected. I just think loads of them don't. It's not a moral thing. It's a cognitive dissonance thing. They were raised going, cannabis is bad. It's the devil. Some guy comes along and goes, actually, it saved this kid's life. They've got to then go, the knife crime and the bad people and the human trafficking and all the things the media has taught them and trained them about cannabis. They have to push to one side and go, well, that must be the Rex. The people on the streets smoking on the corners, they're still dangerous and evil and dangerous and bad. And oh my God, keep moving my kids. But this one, thank you, doctor, you've saved my life. Here's thousands of pounds.
But it's still got cannabis in the name. If it's cannabinoids,
exactly.
That's the exact way.
Yeah, that's what Steve Moore said, isn't it? When they wound down the CMC. I'm trying to get the acronym.
Are they wound down now?
No, he didn't wind it down. He
changed the name.
He moved on. So there was the.
I've heard he's still floating about.
I'm trying to think. He is definitely God. Definitely. I'm trying to the two acronyms. What were the two companies? The Centre for Medicinal Cannabis, CMC.
Yeah, and the ACI, the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry.
Cannabinoid, yeah. And that's what it was the switch. And there was this very definite thing happened 2018, 2019, where the language and the rhetoric uniformly changed. So, and that's where I think where you're correct with this. I think one of the ways you could maybe circumnavigate this, if this exists for cannabis, if you can prove this mechanism exists for something else, you can show that you can almost show that there is an apparatus there that what they're doing. So even if you can't continue to fight your case, obviously by all means, because you've got to fight that precedent and show that there is journalistic integrity across the board. If there is journalistic interest, it has to be for all size individuals. It can't just be, oh no, your company's only got 3 people, you need 20 actually. No, you need a circulation of XYZ. That's not how it works.
There's 2 points now that I need to address. Like, Let's park the ACI one there, because I believe I've got some information for you that you might not have certainly from the last time you did a podcast. It should be new. But let's rewind about 2-3 minutes, right? Cannabis and cannabinoid medicines being essential for defense, right? Why did GW get an office in Porton-Down if they were growing in Sittingbourne? Did they grow plants there? Well, lots of reports came out from the government saying, no, there's no cannabis being grown at Porton-Down. Well, if that's the case, why did they have an office?
And why did it need to be in a secure facility? And given the licensing restrictions and regulations that came from the first license they then obtained retrospectively, that meant that they would have needed to be in a secure facility.
But Sittingbourne was secure enough from 1998 for Sam David Watson to come down and plant all his seeds.
But you and I both know there was work that went on prior to the official record, and yeah, I think it comes down to that. It was a Lib Dem dude. Which one report was it? 97, 96? Come on, brain, pull it out. Do you know the report I'm on about? The inquiry into... It was after 96 when California launched its MMJ system, the medical marijuana card access system. Parliament then set up this royal commission. It was a royal commission. And that then came back, what was it, 97, 98, early 98, and then basically went, look, we need to pursue a domestic market. We need to be looking at this. And I wonder if there was something that happened within that where they basically done exactly what we've just alluded to, where they went, if we can be the guys that transitions from opium to opioids, we own the industry. And you look at the world and what's happening now under Trump, and say the people starting to get really panicked about dollar bonds, which is where most of the Western world's money has been invested since post-World War II. That's what managed to get our economies back working, is that if we don't have domestic industries and the US collapses, you lose all data centers, most of the pharmaceutical companies, most of the industrial producers of chemicals and minerals, and you know what I mean? So companies have been quietly for a while, I think, now been working to have physical assets. Look at the price of gold trajectory over the past 20 years, while still speculating on things like crypto and whatever, and AI and these intangible things. They're still trying to build out infrastructure, because the world is looking at China and going, if everything stopped tomorrow, one of the only countries that is going to be sound is fucking China. Well, for the most part, if you're in the more developed areas of the country. But in terms of then, like, if you know what I mean, global trade routes collapsed, but if you were then the guys that owned the next medicine, because remember, what was that report that came out about with pain? Another acronym I can't pull out of my ass. One of the British medical associations came out the other year and went, look, we have to stop using opioids for chronic pain. We are creating a longevity of pain and suffering for these people. We're not actually dealing with the root causes. And then through the Tiger report and we're talking about like modern applications of new pharmaceuticals, cannabis fits right into that. So I think, if they can be the ones that own the patents for the first drugs out of the market, if you then got like the American system, I think it's like a 99-year license. That's what happened with like oxycodone and Purdue, is they ran out of their first 99-year license, tweaked the recipe, came up with a lie of air quotes a less addictive opioid, and went and fucked the US. And so I think we're in a similar sort of, I'm just seeing history repeat itself.
That's kind of going off. The point of defence being, national defence being essential. Or at least cannabis and cannabinoid-based medicines being essential for national defence. There is, like, what's isn't it? The initial report into GW getting their license indicated that all persons involved were interviewed by Secret Service. And it's like, I mean, is that going right to the top of the food chain? Like, you know, could there not just have been like, PC blogs from Wiltshire Police come around and go, all right, who are you and what do you? Wiltshire accent is terrible, by the way. But who are you and what your intent? To be perfectly honest, right? Because the ACI bit really, really important, right? But when I started doing naughty things back in the day, like 2001, like, I fell over and seeds hit some soil. I'll put a saucer of water about and let it go, kind of like, I was told by the people who were teaching me, right, that what we had was a cutting actually smuggled out of GW in a matchbox. Right. The mental thing is that it was just when I heard of GW. Now, I've got no way of kind of verifying this because I don't talk to the people from way back then, don't know what they're doing. But I would love to know. And the thing is, it was MedMan, right? And I've noticed recently, where I haven't before, that there is a Medicine Man strain. And it's like, what's going on there then? Like, so, maybe Secret Service weren't as thorough as they could have been if something was smuggled out in a matchbox. And maybe they should have got Joe Bloggs from Wiltshire Police. However, ACI, if you don't know this, mate, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. All right. 2018, when I entered the industry, right, I noticed that the CMC was saying a lot in the cannabis space. And it was like, well, hold on. You shouldn't be saying nothing about hemp and CBD because you're called the Center for Medicinal Cannabis. So alignment's off. Equally, any CBD company who advertise the fact that they are members of the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis would be selling uncompliant products because it would be perceived or implied that food products had a larger function than being a food themselves. All right. Then I woke up one day and noticed in the press that there was a new trade association called the ACI. Only it was basically everyone in the CMC wearing different shirts, and I was like,
big mustaches.
yeah. The thing is, throughout the lifetime of novel foods, there's always been a concern about the ACI. All right. The CTA at the time were the UK's largest trade association. And yet I know, because I worked with them, that as soon as novel foods and all of that kicked off, they were basically blanked by the FSA and other regulatory authorities. And then basically the ACI became the FSA's mouthpiece. Nothing was said without them. And yet they never had more than 25 members. To the best of my knowledge, at the peak of when I was at the CTA, they had 450 member companies, which, you would say is a large voice.
You would think.
And yet the FSA chose to basically sidle up to the ACI. I've always kind of commented on them. I've done further research on them. There's some questionable events. But recently I was given a piece of information that showed before the ACI had even been launched, the CMC were having secret meetings with the FSA in an attempt to set up a framework that would basically capture and create a cartel market. I can't believe this. I can't say who's given it to me, right? But what I can tell you is that Steve Moore's in there. John Liebling is in there. Less said about him, the better. There are some well-known big companies in there. And one or two of them have been seen to be getting a easier route into novel foods than everyone else. So the fact that and I'll send it to you after this if you want. You can kind of put it on the screen, but it shows very clearly that the FSA were engaging in a time that was basically recognised as a cooling off period, right? And THC was no interest to the Home Office to the FSA because the Home Office owned it. Right. And basically it was all about creating a captured market. One of the craziest things that used to get me in the run into the 31st of March 2021, which was when the FSA announced that any company with a novel food application had to submit it by. Right.
Yeah.
The ACI were coming out in emails. Right. And I used to have CTA members basically say, Kev, what does this mean? All right. It would be basically join us or die. If you are not a member of the ACI, you will not have products on the shelves past the 31st of March 2021. We got to the 1st of April. And, I think they'd already upset the FSA by that point because there was still a lot of products on shelves. And it didn't matter if you were an ACI member or not. But yeah, absolute solid evidence. And when I sent it to the FSA asking questions, they decided that despite all of my requests highlighting the information being referred to, and that all my requests were submitted politely, I was a person with vexatious character. And that's mental. I've actually got from a subject access request, the FSA saying in regards to Cefyn Jones, if he submits any FOIs that refer to CBD industry or the FSA ourselves, they will be deemed vexatious. And it's like, I'm really asking the right questions at the moment because.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
You don't deem someone vexatious. It's the request that is
100%. Yeah,
viewed.
because I was just about to say there is a sectional response that they can give as a blanket response saying this claim is vexatious, but to claim you as, then to characterize all of your interactions with them as, that surely isn't lawful under the legislation.
It's not lawful under the legislation, and it's even worse for them as they've provided to me through subject access request and freedom of information request all of the information that shows that they are characterizing me and not my requests. All they've been able to do is basically say, oh, you keep on asking repeat questions. Oh, no. What I do is I submit an FOI, they refuse it, and then they don't provide guidance and direction on refinement. So I refine
Which
it.
I think they're supposed to.
Yes, absolutely obliged to. So I refine it, send it in, and they're like, oh, no. They get you to refine it one more time, and then they basically say that, oh, yeah, you're being repetitive, even though they've given you no direction. Yeah. I've noticed that with the Home Office as well. If you start snooping about in an area that they don't really want you snooping about in, refine, vexatious.
Yeah, it's one of the things I learned through my latest batch of FOIs is I was copying in the subsections, basically being like, as per section, you are obligated. If my request is wrong, you're obligated to tell me how to make it right. And then they have to, if you include the copy of it in their duty bound as an officer in whatever public service or entity that they operate in, they've then taken that on board. They have to respond in it, because if you've then claimed that up front and they don't, you can then claim then after the fact. And so, yeah, I was just basically putting in so much of the 2000s Freedom of Information law into it and just being like, if it's this, you have to this. If it's that, you have to this. And just as best I could with all of them. And still, out of 6 FOIs and 1 SAR, all of them have lapsed at this point. They managed to, actually, no, they got one, the Section 106 monies FOI, they got in a few days after. But everyone else has lapsed the first, and I've taken all of them to the ICO. And I'm going to request of the ICO to basically bundle them into one thing rather than drawing them out as individual cases.
No. You've got to do the reverse. Right, because I'm in a very similar situation. I've got 8 ongoing complaints with the ICO. One is against their kind of mistreatment of cases, or similarity of rulings. But the others, 7, there's 5 against the FSA, 1 against the Home Office, and 1 against the ACMD. All right. Now, I've had responses to 3 of them, and that is where I've turned around to them and said, look, can you confirm whether you're seeing my other requests for review in amongst the responses that I've had so far? And they've turned around and said, yes, we are looking at the picture. Right, that's where you want to be. If you tell them what they need to look for, they might be standoffish. But if you send them in as separate complaints, because they won't take them all together, they'll tell you.
I've already sent them in as separate. But what I was thinking to do was just basically to contact them and go, look, exactly that it is part of an overarching picture. This shows a pattern. Because I'm also taking civil litigation against them. I went through legal aid, got approved for legal aid, went and met with them, and unfortunately in the UK, legal aid is designed for individuals. The case is so caught up in, because we're a CIC as well, a community interest company. So I've managed to get into LawWorks, which is like a UK-based group of solicitors and people from the judiciary that offer pro bono representation for non-profits. So just been approved for legal representation there, and we're taking a claim against council because I registered a formal complaint against them alleging what they call maladministration as defined by the local governments and social care ombudsman, which is like the body above that deals with sort of the way that the councils are supposed to deal with community associations and loose groupings of community members. My brain's just gone. 2 seconds.
Legal aid.
Yeah. So we're getting basically the complaint is the maladministration element, which is basically malicious use of bureaucracy in their own systems. So I made a request for reasonable adjustments off the start when dealing with the council when we first met, was given all of these assurances, all of these oral promises, then later through a chain of sort of emails was, led to believe that, a meeting was forthcoming. And then next thing I know, they try and install £250,000 of a gym. We run a campaign and block it. I'm led again to believe a meeting is coming. I then get an email going, oh, the land's being sold. And I suppose actually I'll take this opportunity to catch up sort of my audience to kind of what the crack is with it, or what I can reveal, because there's some things I can't, even though I would very much want to right now. They put it up for sale end of October. We went to view the property as inside of the toilet block, which is part of the garden. Went to meet somebody from the community economic development team, walked around with them. They were very impressed. Obviously, basically what happens is I'll meet an officer from the council. They'll be like, wow, you're impressive. This is great. Let's do all these amazing things. They go back into office. My name is mentioned. Somebody then goes, no, we don't. And then they never talk to me again. And so this Ruth woman promised me she'd go and get me an answer to 2 procedural questions about the bidding process. Very simple shit that frankly I could have gone home and I could have just Googled on the spot. But she said to me, I promise you, end of day today, I'll get you this email. That was 12 weeks ago, whatever it was. Never got back to me. So I gave her a week, thinking, I'll give her the discretion. I went, no, fuck this. So I then filed a 5,000 word complaint alleging 10 points and requesting 10 points of remediation, and stating, obviously, we're going to civil litigation. I'm going to go take a county court judgment against you for discrimination and prejudicial practices, for exclusion from process, because during the gym consultation, the council broke all of its own procedures. They failed to advertise it. They failed to make the public aware. They picked a really obscure time of day, a really obscure day. They tried to then hide their stall into the garden. We arranged to do then a pop-up protest where we would invite the public down to come and provide comment onto the record, perfectly allowed. An hour before the event, we got sent a very threatening, shitty email saying that I had no lawful right to be there and that we would be excluded from the public consultation. Obviously, I went, fuck you, and we went and did our thing. We brought down 60-odd people from all of the movers and shakers, the residents groups, the Durham Pointers, the City of Durham Trust. Do you know what I mean? Like, people that you were like, why would they support us? But they support the overall project because they've seen what we've done. The council had a technical issue, couldn't record any faults on their iPad that they brought, so there was no complaints logged. They called the police on us, and the cops turned up, and luckily the cops knew me. The main cop who turned up, it was a woman that I'd done a training course with Durham Police, because obviously they've identified me as useful. And so we did a thing where I worked with several PCSOs and several junior officers, and we talked about community issues, stuff like that. And I basically just gave them a crash course in drugs and cultural use and kind of removed some of their stigmas and prejudice. So when she saw me, she was like, "Hey, morning, how you doing? What's that?" We had a nice little chat, and she's like, "I don't know what I'm doing down here." I went, "Well, I think they've probably called you." She went, "I'll go sort it out." She wandered up, had a go at the council, came back and went, "You're perfectly fine, there's no problem here." And then since then, like I said, it's been this pattern, and then they started to email us, threatening me, misrepresenting the situation, claiming that Elvet Green sells drugs. And I'm like, excuse me, we're a community association that maintains and manages a space. One of the other community groups that uses that space, amongst like the LARPers, the role players, the Poets Society from the Union, all these different other people that use the park that we've built, happens to be Durham City Cannabis Club. They're an association made up of prescribed patients, lawful patients. And so they've misrepresented us as druggies. So the reason my subject access request isn't coming out is because I've heard from parish councillors and even a county councillor that I've been referred to as a druggie, that we are not the type of people they want to be working with. So our judgment, I think we're going to get quite a claim against them, because the evidence I've got already is over 100 different correspondence of them refusing to answer questions, refusing to make the reasonable adjustments they'd agreed to at the start of this, the misrepresentation of the situation, like I said, the maladministration. They've completely fucked the whole process. The land is now, we decided that we're still running a campaign to pause its sale with a petition, etc., given the success of the gym. But the time period for the sale is now elapsed. There's so much I want to say here. But
hold on, let me just kind of ask you first and foremost, right? Do you think this is against you, or someone upstairs doesn't like the project, or do you think it's both and you're being attacked to stop the project?
It's well, this is all public record. So the main person I've had an issue with has been the parish and county councillor David Freeman, ironically a Lib Dem, and he is a bigot. He is anti-cannabis. Cannabis is drugs, cannabis is bad, even though Lib Dem's national policy that they've ran on for the past 3 elections, decriminalisation of cannabis. So, first problem. Elbert Green, the park that we've maintained since 2017, he has ran on for the past 2 election cycles. We're going to put money in and change that park. We're going to make it into something. Never done a thing. Never consulted anybody. Never done nothing. Just said, you electors will do something eventually. For 10 fucking years. During that time, we've transformed that space from a needle-ridden, literally having diapers, human shit, like taken apart in camp. You wouldn't believe the crap that I've removed physically from that space. We've completely transformed it to from what it was to what it is. Now, literally, people come walk their dogs in the morning. People come and play with their kids on the green. We have raised flower beds, nature walks, seating areas, bird feeders. We've gone through a biodiversity, wildlife rejuvenation and protection project. Like, if you can think of it, I've fucking done it down there. It's
you're gonna stick some pictures on of this as I'll
link now. I can't be asked for that. I'll link to Elvin Green Facebook below. That's the best way to do it, because if you scroll back on Facebook, you can see what it was. Yeah. You can watch this journey. Pinned on the top of Facebook as well, guys, is the slides from the presentation we did at the cafe last year, kind of showcasing the work that we've done and kind of our plans for the future in terms of the cafe, etc. But in terms of answering your original question, yeah, David Freeman, then he's cut off his nose to spite his face. He almost would rather have nothing than work with us. He will not talk to us, will not engage with us. He fucking hates me. We've had 2 or 3 interactions, and he has just been pompous and just like, no, but I'm in charge. Are you in charge? No, I'm in charge. And obviously they've told me I'm not allowed to do half the shit I've done, but I know the law. I've gone and dealt with this shit and gone, well, touch me, deal with it. I've built relationships with the police. The council would have to get the police to come and deal with me. The cops like us being there. They see the benefit. They see the savings that they have. They see the space being transformed. So basically, he's got this stick up his arse, frankly, that you're stopping me. So they tried to do the gym. We blocked that. That has angered them beyond measure. Little old us, them druggies, have stopped our development. So they put £250,000 towards this. I've just found out through the FOIs that it was Section 106 money, which is money that is put into a giant pot for local authorities when people come in as private developers and build up commercial or residential spaces. That money then gets ring-fenced towards certain projects. This Section 106 money was about £550,000, which was ring-fenced for recreational and leisure activities within the region. Which is an irony, because obviously what are we? Recreational leisure activities. But again, they sent us a letter in January basically thanking me for our work, saying it's amazing, telling us not to touch the fucking toilet, which we've respected since, which is important in a minute when I catch you up with an expert. So we kind of left that alone, maintained the rest of the park. I used their gratitude and expression of, interest in what we've done to then reply to them saying, oh, can I take this to them? I mean, retrospectively, you're saying that everything else we've done is fine, so we can continue on with that. But what you're requesting of us is this thing. I then stated that I understand, as in I stand under your request within this. I'll honour it. And they didn't question our correspondence, so we were then given basically a preferential space to act in. I mean, the whole reason we were able to transform the park over the past 2 years is I wrote to the Green and Clean team, like one of the environmental departments in the council, requesting them to cut down the hedges and to reopen up all the paths there, because it was basically a hazard. There'd been a few sexual and violent assaults in the alleyway. There's been none since we've cleared all that up. We cut in back all the paths, retransformed the whole grounds of it, because they emailed me saying, oh, we don't own that asset. So in a court of law, I could use that as a defence for what they call material amendments, because that's the whole thing with this. I can't install permanent infrastructure because I'm not the landowner. Because it's public authority and not private, squatting and trying to get towards what they call an adverse possession doesn't work within this. You'd have to get to a 12...
I was thinking about that.
You have to get to a 12-year window of adverse possession, and that's why we think they kicked in with the gym, because we were on year 8 and we were moving strong. So they then suddenly decided they cut the grass for the first time ever and killed our lawn, even though we had a private company, Cut and Strim Property Management, come in for 18 months and help us reseed and redevelop that lawn. They came in and cut it all back with about 60% of it, which is where they were going to destroy the green and put in the gym equipment. So they've just gotten through all of this fucking bullshit behaviour of pushing us off, denying us conversation, even though we have a legitimate claim as stakeholders that we had all of the public backing. We had the backing of the North East Mayor, the backing of our MP, the backing of the, other than David Freeman, the other parish and county councillors in that ward. And yeah, so they've basically, like I said, put it to sale now. Actually, no, sorry, before we move on with that. Yeah, it's basically Freeman is the guy, it's his ward, his area. He's been connected to this for a long time. But our council is now Reform. Reform in their last manifesto ran on a platform of life sentences for drug dealers. I can't imagine what they'd want to do to somebody like me. Do you know what I mean? So I think
Reform Tory light.
Reform is Tory heavy.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like the issue there, because certainly Labour and the Conservatives have heavily reinforced the narratives that have got us to where we are. So our reform got to be any different, and that kind of makes me kind of chuckle every now and then, because you said about that Lammy guy being a Lib Dem, and the Lib Dems kind of political promises over the years, and there's quite a few people who turned around to me and said, "Oh, are you going to vote Lib Dems because they might give you what you want?" And it's like, no, they won't, because what will happen is they'll suggest they will. They might get in power, but oops, they've just found out that there's a public-private partnership and it's all skunk and cannabis is bad. So, the case in point is when Clegg was Deputy Prime Minister, in the coalition with Cameron. He went in there with, student loans being a big focus, as well as the legalization of cannabis. Was it legalization or decriminalization? I forget. I thought it was legalization, because
I think it was legal, and then they switched it to decrim. After that, something happened in terms of a policy approach, wasn't it? Because there wasn't really a nuanced conversation about decrim versus legal until after cannabis went back to a B.
I think Stephen Oliver from the Canna Consultants was the one who pointed that out. We all turn around and say decrim, decrim, decrim. But the problem is decrim leaves the laws on the book. It just becomes a choice of whether
it depends whether it's de facto or de jure. So if it's de facto decriminalisation, there is no amendment to the legislation. If there is the de jure change, that means that the previous policy is either erased or new policy comes on to circumvent it. It's like the 2018 amendment to the 2001 misuse of drug regulations.
But you want the amendment to remove all of the craziness that surrounds cannabis. If it's still in the book, it doesn't matter what kind of setting it is.
But that's what the conversation. Legalization is only ever a new amendment. If you check every jurisdiction in the world, it is always a new amendment, which then leaves that it be higher court interpretations, and then go, oh yeah, well what we'll do is like in the UK, your Schedule 2 producers, medical value, you grow at home, dear. Schedule 1, devil, he's trying to poison children. That's the issue with then creating new, do you know what I mean?
We ever get to a point of legalization, mate, I think there would have been enough of a public conversation to realise, A, that that's not the case, and B, the government have been using skunk as narrative fuel for the best part of nearly 30 years now. But
we know that.
I, of course, have a very, very kind of similar story into what you just explained. But before I touch on it, when we had a little conversation behind closed doors before originally having this interview, you mentioned something about reasonable adjustments in your court push. Fancy telling me how you're kind of applying that or implying that?
I orally requested adjustments to be made in communications with the council officer who was assigned to my case. Requested clear, timely communications, requested continuity of individual, and a few other things in conversation with them, which was initially upheld by them. I can't remember remember the phrasing of what she said. But she said basically effectively too that, yeah, we will. And then it's evidenced in the next several correspondence. It's not just short replies. She's really broken. It's almost not talking to us like a child, but really using not open language. It's very closed, very defined words so I can understand exactly what you're saying. And then it starts to break down and become ever more ambiguous. And then other people are emailing me from different departments. And then you're getting passed around and it just goes into this web of trying to... It's almost like they've gone, oh, if we just do this, he'll get bored and go away. They then weaponized it against me. They then went, oh, right, all we'll do is we'll wait months and not tell him. And then he'll get wound up and da-da-da. And he won't know procedure and he won't know da-da-da. He won't know to go register it as an asset of community value. They won't know about cat transfers. They won't know about... Yeah, I've asked and going like, no, as the public authority, you're supposed to help me navigate this shit.
Whereas so you've been effectively discriminated through the process that you entered into in good faith, that the council entered into good faith, and then basically everything started going skew-if from there.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the whole thing based on what is the thing in British law? Reasonable expectation. So our conversations and communications led to a reasonable expectation that an interdisciplinary departmental meeting was forthcoming before any action would be taken by the council, and that adjustments would be made. And that then, like I said, she got into office and so she talked to somebody higher up. It happened to with each department, be it land, community, economic development, whichever department I was speaking to initially, like, yeah, sweet. They'd go up the chain or something, and then boom, we don't.
It's terrible because, I feel like laws and process are there to, well, allegedly make our lives easier and fairer.
Yeah.
Right. But there are some times where certainly the likes of me and you and what we do, that we come across situations where there's a loose interpretation that is not there to deflect as much as it is to, as you say, discourage and dissuade from continuance. And I've kind of had that myself, as we also talked about, behind closed doors. I think before I kind of say this, though, right, I want to kind of highlight something. The fight on cannabis, where is it? Right? And that's a fair question, right? Because I don't feel that there's been as many fronts open as there are right now. And they're all just being dismissed, whether it's recreational, whether it's the hemp and CBD sector, whether it's the unlicensed cannabis sector. There seems to be frustrations, and constant pushbacks. And my obviously, the situation is obviously hemp and CBD related, but at the same time, it spans across the board. There's the GW influence. There's the cartel influence. There's the rules for thee but not for me kind of element, and it's constant with cannabis. So if people think that the hemp and CBD industry is boring and unglamorous, trust me, it's far from that. It's on a level kind of setting as any craziness that comes in with a rec. Kind of, shall we call it industry? I think it's fair, regardless of status. And of course, the medicinal industry. I recently tried to secure the legality of a food, namely hemp and CBD, but specifically whole plant products. Right, not CBD isolate, not synthetic crap, and I think we're near 10 times. I think out of all of the times that I've been on here, synthetic is just one that is probably the mention where I'm most likely to swear or come close to it. But at the end of the day, whole plant products. Now, as but others might not know, I stepped into the hemp and CBD industry in 2016. In 2017 was when I first heard the words novel foods, right? And since then, the word novel, literally, it's like the spider sense. Like, all the hairs on my arms go up. It's like, It's a horrible word. It's almost as bad as some people think the word moist is. But that's maybe a conversation for a different kind of show. But in essence, I tried to secure the legality of hemp and CBD whole plant products, specifically up to 10% CBD and made up to 0.2% THC, and created using traditional methods, right? That's working on the basis of 1997 being the cutoff for what's known as novel food regulations, right? Which is crazy, because if you had a food before that time, it's an old food. And, longevity of consumption, almost all of the times covers safety profile and whatnot, right? And if you've eaten a food after that, say an old food in a new format or a new food that wasn't about before 1997, then it's novel. Then you need to start doing toxicology reports on this, shelf life testing, anything that the FSA says, we're not certain about this. Can you kind of, provide information to provide information for the safety of consumption of this food that you want to bring to market, right? Hemp products have been about for ages, right? Well before 1997. And arguably, when the FSA accepted whole plant products in 2017, that was whole plant CBD products, which previous to that acceptance were whole plant hemp extract based products, right? And the 10% angle, I mean, that's quite justifiable. Have you ever heard of the strain called Compulti?
Compulti?
Spelled with a K.
No.
It's an interesting strain, I believe, developed in 1952 in Hungary, right? Now,
okay.
in EU literature, it'll suggest that you can get up to 5 to 8% CBD, right? Which is just about all right. But I know farmers who've attested to it being able to achieve 14% CBD. And I've seen lab reports from indoor grows that suggest that in perfect conditions, it can exceed 20%. All right. Now, in that respect, I think there's justification for 10% consumption, because, you've got, like, for example, the place that this strain was bred for is Hungary. Hungary has a lot of sunshine in the summer, so that's got to be nice growing conditions. So it's arguable that it would, in essence, be able to achieve over 10%. Equally, you've also got the discovery of CBD to draw on, right? In 1940, a red hemp oil derived from wild Minnesotan hemp was used, and in isolation provided 33% by weight of CBD. That's quite a lot, and from a wild strain as well. So, 10%, 0.2% THC. Well, the Home Office overreached in 2018, July, I believe, when they applied the Misuse of Drugs Regulation 2001 1 milligram rule on CBD products. If they accept it as a food, then, as they do, then really it shouldn't be subject to that ruling. It should be subject to 0.2 or now 0.3.
If anything, the prescription market in the UK is what should be subject to that regulation legislation, because it is by definition not a food, but from the same source. Unless it's
truly authorized. But
I'm just reading about this cultivar now.
So at the end of the day, right, there has been this move from Epidiolex, being authorized in the EU, UK, and US, basically to restrict the hemp and CBD industries. So I submitted last year what's known as an Article 4 submission. That basically asks the FSA to provide a determination on the novel status of a specific food, which I've already outlined. Now, bit of background context on this. When novel foods first started kicking off, the CTA were supposed to have sorted out an Article 4, but they chose to stop. All right. I've seen EU documents for conversations between the CTA, IA, and the EU and FSA, where they were directed in submitting an Article 4, but they basically chose not to. for whatever reason, right?
Sorry, just to is this under the old configuration of the CTA or under current management?
That was actually a crossover from the old to the current.
Okay.
Because old Mr. Harlington left, I believe, September 2020, but he was removed from his position in July because he had said something without board approval. He was put on gardening leave, and that's when Sean Phillips stepped in as the MD at the time.
Okay. No, just for sort of clarity's sake, because I think I'm going to get Sean and Marika on the podcast in sort of the coming sort of weeks.
Oh, enjoy, because what you're about to hear now does include them massively. So, yeah, let's get back. So I submitted an article that was on the 9th of September last year. And on the 12th of September, I received an email from the FSA providing me with a portal to upload supplemental data and other bits and pieces. One of those bits and pieces was an endorsement letter from the CTA, who rated my Article 4. Another was actually a letter requesting reasonable adjustments because of dyslexia and dyspraxia. Basically, I requested a conversation with the FSA before any decision had been arrived to basically discuss the strengths, weaknesses, and any requested additional data that they wanted, right? Now, that was all submitted on the 26th of that month. And then basically from that point, I've had a little bit of an intriguing kind of situation develop. So on the day that I submitted my data, I found out through a subject access request that Marika Graham Woods sent an email to Chris Stockdale, who is the head of CBD policy for the FSA, saying that we should talk. He responded and basically said, yeah, I'm free for the 3rd of November. 3rd of October. All right. Now that meeting went ahead, and then Shana Marika called me, and they basically recounted a conversation with the FSA regarding my Article 4 submission, which is highly inappropriate because even though they submitted a letter of endorsement, they were not given any authority to act whatsoever. So by all accounts, the FSA turned around to the CTA and said, he needs to quote EU Regulation 2018/456. That is actually the mechanism for the Article 4. You don't have to quote it in any way. So that was intriguing. Furthermore, there was a hint that I had not submitted enough proof of ingestion. Now, proof is subjective here because you can have receipts, you can have recipes and the likes of, but one of the biggest things that I'm relying on is regulatory acceptance over time and questioning why that changed, because there's no true justification. But equally on top of that, there is a lot of information on general consumption of hemp and CBD products. Well, hemp products, which ultimately become CBD products over time, which is kind of like a natural evolution in those kind of products.
It's like a clarifier in a way, but they can't then argue that if the product was considered to be, quotes, hemp, well, I dislike the language, it's still one of its main constituent parts will have been cannabidiol. So they can't,
yeah.
It's just one of those little bits of trickery that they're doing there to move us toward going, yeah, well, cannabinoids are medicine. They can't be foods.
Well, so we move on, right? And the third thing was that basically the FSA would accept the application in principle if it was submitted properly, right? Now, that kind of raised my eyebrows. And as I was pondering that, I was also informed by Marika that Chris was a nice chap. and that I would get on with him if I ever had a chance to chat with him. Chris, of course, Chris Stockdale being the head of CBD policy. I think such a comment's interesting because ultimately, I don't think I'm going to be a friend of anyone related to CBD policy. Equally, when I was going through part of my complaint back in the day, just to kind of backtrack now slightly, Emily Miles, the author of CBD policy, although I didn't know it at the time, was the person who provided the final response to my complaint, which was, in effect, against her policy, right? And as soon as I got that response, I got a call from Marika. And she said, "Oh, I've heard through the grapevine that Emily Miles is going back to DEFRA." I'm like, well, that's quite convenient because she's just basically poo-pooed a major complaint against the FSA's handling of CBD novel foods. And it's quite an inappropriate response, not language-wise, it's just stupidity-wise. She's like, you don't have to touch her now. You just, that's it. And I'm like, I don't have to touch her. And I'd already knew about CBD policy because the Home Office had dropped it randomly at me in 2023. And I was like, hold on a second. So I FOI'd the Home Office, and lo and behold, they confirmed that Emily Miles was the author of CBD policy. And they also said that they couldn't supply files to it because the policy was ongoing and because policy advisors are entitled to a safe space, which I find ironic because apparently all of the companies who are getting shafted through CBD novel foods don't deserve a safe space at all. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. But let's get back to what I was saying. So I had this conversation with Marika. She told me about EU Reg 2018-456, not enough proof of ingestion, which I could test, and that it would be accepted in principle if I submitted it properly. And then, of course, being told that Chris Stockdale was a nice guy, and he may well be. That's by the by. So basically, I turned around to the CTA and said, I'm not changing anything in my Article 4 until the FSA direct me appropriately. Right, because something
it needs to be done through official channels. Yeah, you need that recourse if it comes to it.
So about a week or two later, right, I have a conversation with Sian Phillips, and what was let loose was that during that meeting, the FSA had asked the CTA for a working paper post haste in regards to seed oil. Right, I'm like, hold on, I've given the definition of what is and isn't a novel food right earlier.
Cold pressed seed oil is like the oldest.
Exactly. So why would the FSA request the CTA for a working paper on that, right? But then a couple of weeks after that, I have a call from Marika, and she's told me that working paper's been submitted as an Article 4. And I'm like, well, hold on. Mine's for whole plant products, and it clearly separates from seed oil. You've submitted one in for seed oil, and I believe that has the potential to disrupt my Article 4. What on earth is going on? So there's a little bit of a back and forth, right? This has led me to approach the FSA, and I've asked them not just for confirmation of the CTA meeting, but also confirmation of reasonable adjustments that were requested before for a conversation to discuss the strengths, weaknesses, and any outstanding information of, for the application. They basically responded, we don't talk to third parties about submissions and applications, and the meeting did not happen. Right? They told me that a couple of times. So I had to submit an FOI and a subject access request. Both confirmed that, Marika had initiated contact. There was a meeting on the day that Marika and Sian said. And basically, there are no notes for that meeting whatsoever, which is highly peculiar because taking aside talking about my Article 4, if the FSA requested a a working paper on seed oil, there should be an agenda for that. There should be information on the intent, and likewise, but there's nothing. All right. So there's been a little bit of a back and forth on this, to the point that inside of that, in regards to reasonable adjustments, first of all, they said, no, all you're going to get is a phone call when we've made our decision, and we're going to explain our decision, and that's all you're getting. And I was like, hold on, I don't think you kind of understand the premise of reasonable adjustments. It's supposed to allow me a level playing field inside of processes such as Article 4s. So they then came back, and it was like, obviously paraphrasing here. Okay, then, so we'll have a conversation with you, but it will be on our terms, and it will be prior to decision. I'm like, you're still not getting this. So I actually submitted court documents. It's quite a long story. Submitted court documents for a county court case for breach of reasonable adjustments, namely sections 20 and 29. That's fair playing field, and the process, I can't be jeopardized in the process, which has happened, because at the end of the day, the FSA talked to the CTA about my Article 4 submission, but they refused to talk to me, and then they kind of accepted that they needed to talk to me, but under their rules. All right. So 2 interesting things have happened since that. The first one is that the courts lost my paperwork. All right, this is absolutely mental, because I posted, for those who I haven't sent to sleep yet, if you're going to take anyone to county court, right, you can do that online. But if you're going to take a regulatory authority to court, then you have to post. Right, which becomes a pain in the bum, because obviously you need to sort out postal orders, print copies, and postage and whatnot. And if you're like me, living in a village where you've got to go to the next village along to use the post office and whatnot, it starts getting rather frustrating. The thing is, I posted it on the 17th of December. 18th of December, the tracking shows that it got to its place, signed for by a person called Ben. 12th of January, I'm thinking, this is getting a little bit long now. And I noticed Blaze Against Corruption. If you haven't seen him, he's on Facebook. He's down in the Southwest, and he seems to be going through a few legal battles in regards to cannabis as well. Well, he basically announced that one of his cases had been accepted on that day. And I said, well, when did you submit that case? He said, on the 7th of January. I'm like, mine was signed for on the 18th of December. So that's actually quite a long time then. So he's literally given me the soundest advice anyone could give me at the time: ring the courts, which I did. And basically the courts, first of all, said, you're not in the system, and I was like, well, you guys have signed for it, and whatnot. And I had to go through a 12-day process of them basically confirming that actually they lost my paperwork. Now, the craziest thing, right, and a few people have asked me if I see conspiracies in what I'm about to say, and I've turned around and said, no, I've got to accept this as an admin issue, is that 2 days after I raised a complaint with the courts team about missing paperwork was when the FSA contacted me and said, oh, do you know what? We'll have a little bit more of a reasonable adjustment than we suggested beforehand. And I'd already said to the courts, this delay is going to cause me detriment. Right? That is the definition of detriment, because I was going to challenge a process which has already kind of moved on in part due to my own stubbornness, not so much the FSA kind of bending over and saying, yeah, all right, then you're right. That in effect has continued. Because the second part of this, whilst I'm still waiting for the courts to basically process my paperwork, which is apparently now set as priority, although I'm still waiting. the FSA have further contacted me, and it's actually on Friday, right? And they've set out exactly what they view reasonable adjustments are. And basically, they've sent me a letter, right, with a couple of parts in there, and they're saying, we want you to spell out the legitimacy of the food that you're applying for, all right? Here's the paperwork. In about 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, sorry, we'll have a conversation on the 2nd of March, and then you've got 1 week past there to submit the document that we're asking you to fill in. Now, that's not a reasonable adjustment, because I should be able to turn around and say, well, this part here, I've got evidence to show that, blah, blah. Have you guys looked at that evidence? Can you give me your interpretation of that evidence? No, they're not doing any of that. It's just literally, see that box there, fill it in. You know the box underneath it? Fill that in as well. The next box past there, you've got a choice.
That's not reasonable adjustment. That's instruction. That's instruction for process, exactly. Not adjustment for your participation within the process.
And here's the mentalist thing, right? The guy who I've got a meeting with is nothing to do with the Article 14 whatsoever, nothing to do with the CBD team whatsoever. He is the head of Trade Policy and Risk Unit.
Risk is a very stingy word there.
Well, it's a very stingy word, because going back to my my complaint against the FSA's handling of novel foods, the FSA originally misrepresented that complaint, because the head of complaints, Noel Sykes, the guy who turned around to me and said the civil servants have a habit of ignoring inconvenient truths, he actually said that he was the guy who was investigating the complaint. But then the FSA went to an employment agency called MatchTech and hired a guy called Philip Randall, who happened to be their ex-head of resilience. Not the type of guy you want investigating a complaint in good faith, but exactly the type of guy you want to manage a complaint out existence. Only he didn't do too well with me, because I'm still here and still making a noise about that. But yeah, at the end of the day, the FSA, they are desperate not to allow my Article 4. And what I believe that they've done is they coerced the CTA, knowingly or otherwise, to submit a counter Article 4. Going back to the FSA saying to the CTA, we'll accept in principle if it was submitted appropriately. I believe that that was for them to basically say, right, okay, the clock stopped until we got that information. In the meantime, though, the CTA application is going on full flow, right? And what's more, right, the CTA had direct input on the dynamics and requirements of an Article 4 itself. The FSA could have given me that on the 3rd of October, but it wasn't until the 9th of this month that they've actually said, well, okay, look at this block, look at this block, look at this block, look at this block. We'll talk about them on the 2nd of March, and then you'll have 7 days to basically verify to us the legitimacy of whole plant hemp products as CBD products. And subject to 0.2% THC, none of that 1 milligram bullshit. Sorry, swearing.
Hey, I swear constantly. That's what this is for. It's an adult space.
Yeah, well, occasionally.
Wait, I mean, my only
you get me in, mate.
Yeah, it's an insanity, because it's the same thing. It's the covering of their own backs. It's the machinations of these miscreants within the system. Is just, it's what I was saying before about like class interest. Is they're elevated into a world, they operate within a world, and they're inculcated into this belief that, well, no, we have authority. You go, oh, your wheelie bin's out on the path, here's a letter, and you've got to remove that now. And it's that sense of how that power kind of corrupts and the culture that creates. And then little old any one of us kind of goes, oh, actually, here's the law, and what it says is, and I'm right, and we know we're right. And they then use all of these and
They know you're
unforeseen.
right.
Yeah. That's why they work against you. They then go,
but they'll throw their interpretation at you, and they know full well that the only way that you're going to be able to challenge that is if you go to court. Now, me and you are in a very interesting situation in that, you know, we're able to employ the county court on the basis of the Equalities Act. There's a lot of people who haven't got the time, energy, or money to be able to do that, even though engaging the county court system is not as expensive as most might think. I mean, in regards to me, for example, I feel like I could take the FSA to court for a lot more than what I am doing. And that would be on the basis of continuance as well as dismissal of reasonable adjustments, regardless of how they frame it or not. I'm literally only having to pay £205 to take them to court. I could quote how much that covers for me on the Vento scale, but I'd rather anyone going through that kind of process just look at it itself. Let's just say that it's not that much at all. But equally, I think people like us, we need to kind of realize that it's not about getting money off the court or the defendant. Actually, it's about using the process to get orders that maybe processes should be conducted fairly. For example, I mean, that, you know, sounds simple, but it's actually quite a powerful thing to have from a judge. If you can show that you're being shafted in some manner, then them saying, you know, sort your act out has a lot of weight, because if it comes back in front of them again and it shows that actually they didn't sort their act out, that judge is going to be pretty narcs. I mean, that would be unfortunate for the defendant if it was the same judge who gave the initial order. But even if it isn't, that judge is still going to be pretty narked.
100%. It's one of the only bits of legislation. It's one of the reasons that they want to remove it. We're seeing this war at the minute of even like Labour politicians and shit, which is quite scary. Talking about, you know, we need to reduce PIP. We need to reduce the number of people that are like claiming to be anxious and depressed and having, you know, debilitating mental health conditions, and presenting it as, you know, this loss of efficiency to the system, and it's this laziness, this intrinsic laziness. And it's the same like the European Convention on Human Rights. It's these few acts and bits of legislation that actually are really powerful for the individual. Granted, it's not easy to navigate, but if you have the persistence, the passion, and if you are right, you can get through that process. I think what we're both facing is something that is difficult because the regulatory systems, the authorities, and all of these things are set up to obfuscate the real criminality. And in both of our cases, I mean, I'm dealing with an accusation. One of the main things I'm alleging against the council is what they call predetermination. So they've predetermined an outcome for an asset. They've not done an equality and inclusion review, because if they did, they'd have found there's a pre-existing community and they would have been obligated to deal with us. This would have changed all of the procedures and the way that they've operated under. If I can prove this, that can potentially have criminal consequences for individuals involved in that conspiracy. In the same as what you're looking at is, if then the truth is revealed, it scratches the surface and goes, holy shit, there's a whole room back here. What is in these cabinets? What's all this? And it starts to unpin a mass conspiracy that's not just historic and ongoing, but it is pinned to the future of, like I said, of this country, or at least certain elements within the establishment. It's a cash cow. It's a thing that they want to control, and ultimately they don't want others to control. It's not just like, we want to have it, we don't want you to have it. And I think that's evident with GW's influence through the FDA in America and what's happened through the states and the hemp bill and what's going on with because that was a massive thing. The big, beautiful bill, fucking twat that he is, that was watered down and a lot of it was broken out. But one of the things that passed within it was an amendment to the Farm Bill 2018. What that does is there's a 12-year memorandum that we're in right now, a pause period where the industry can kind of get its shit together, challenge it. So it's not going to come into force for another, I think, 10 months at this point. I think it's next January. But that bans outright the synthetics loophole of the, air quotes, hemp-derived consumables. That whole disappears. The THC loophole, that disappears. And it starts to break it down and separate, and then the Hemp Act is then agricultural non-consumable products. And then they're going, but we're not moving forward on rec. I've just written a nice article for Weed World. You kind of prescribe freedom, talking about the consequences of Schedule 3, kind of how they're going to navigate around the system and what that's sort of doing. It's about the medicalization of all cannabinoids. So then we're starting to see various states in the US. There's a couple of ballots on this year for, legalization, yeah, but there's several ballots for removing legalization. Florida is a really interesting battleground in the US to see.
I've been watching, because I'm more active on LinkedIn than I am on Facebook. And I obviously kind of watch the kind of fallout to businesses in regards to this move. Now, in regards to intoxicating hemp and synthetic cannabinoids, if we were just sitting down without the cameras on, I wouldn't kind of correct the record here because I know what you're on about. But the thing is that the whole campaign actually confused the definition between semi-synthetic and synthetic. Right.
Deliberately.
In itself, and that in itself kind of, adds to the narratives that we're already facing on whatever kind of angle. Now, the other 2 points of interest, right? One that I think, the one that I spotted, and from what you suggested there, I think you spotted as well. But the other one, I'm kind of curious on your opinion on, right? So, reschedulings. Schedule 3, right? So that allows for medicinal products to be shipped over state lines. Yeah. That's all I'm aware of. And when we're looking at authorized cannabinoid-based products, I think there's 3 in the US, isn't there? Because I don't think Sativex is authorized, but it's Epidiolex, and there's 2 synthetic THC products as well.
I can't remember the name of the one I'm thinking of.
At the end of the day, it's just obscene. How would people be celebrating that?
It's because, again, what did we say earlier? I'm trying to think if this was an off-the-record comment. Like 90% of the clinics and all of these people in that space, they're waiting to be bought up by the big boys.
So that was off-record,
So they're celebrating, basically. The move towards federal means, okay, that's we've got the country. Canada's already got its thing. We can now export to Canada. There's 130 million in Mexico, and they've passed laws that we could influence and we could set up the domestic market. The idea of a United Americas in terms of a trade partner, a NAFTA on crack, as it were, the kind of has been concocting over many sort of years. And I think part of that is the drugs market. South America has obviously made some very interesting moves around cocaine. You've obviously got Is it Johnson & Johnson? Yeah, made Numbrino, the cocaine-derived nasal spray. You've also got a company that made a ketamine one called esketamine, which I think is hilarious, considering we call people sketty when they're ketty. But anyway, back to the point of the thing that's really going to fuck on is there's loads of people putting out narratives and whatever, obviously to protect their financial interests and getting bought up later. But they're confusing the narrative because anything that then goes into an accepted pharmaceutical can only be regulated by one authority in America, and that's the FDA. And it's the same thing we're seeing in the UK. Exactly what happened. The Home Office basically went, you want it? Oh, Mikey! And it's like being outside an exclusive club, and they're lined up, and they've got the little red robes, and they just keep pulling up in limousines, and all the big boys keep going, I'll turn it, get some space in a minute, and they just keep coming through. And that's all that's going to happen again. And the guys that want to be bought up are like, fuck yeah, money's here. Yes, daddy, I'm worth loads of money. Look how good we are. Look at our market share. Look at my social media presence and our AI-generated marketing. And do you know what I mean? And it's... So, like I said, you were talking about earlier about unique fronts. The US is about to become a really interesting front because if there can be an interstate movement towards actual descheduling, and by virtue of that, the decriminalisation would then come through federal authorization. There'd then be pressure placed down, granted there'd be states' rights to have prohibitive things, but they couldn't then impede on federal rights. It would then create a really interesting whole legislative situation. The only problem with that in the States is that the Supreme Court is very stacked one way. There's 2 judges that potentially could stand down in Trump's term, which means Trump would get to appoint them, which means Trump would have appointed 5 out of 9 judges in the US, I think. The Supreme judges, and he's a money dude. They're not about freedom, regardless of his politics and anything fucking else about the orange turd. He just wants to make money, and loads of the cannabis space has become people that just want to make money. And so there's going to be that coalescence and that joining of interests. They'll create their thing and it'll all end up being medical. Because what they also want on the other side of that is dirty druggies. They don't want to deal with the cognitive dissonance. They want the ability to look at us and call us druggies and hippies and wasters and losers, yet they can sell billions of kilos and they're just good businessmen. Do you know what I mean? They need that juxtaposition.
Yeah, interestingly, have you heard that the signing of the executive order for all this, and just so while it's in my mind, I want to talk about seed issues over there as a result of that.
Effectively criminalised backhandedly, yeah.
But yeah, there has been suggestions that all of the noise, which includes Trump going, "Oh, CBD's good." And then, like, you know, there's going to be an executive order, but we're not going to tell you what it is until it's signed. Some have suggested that was a little bit of a smoke screen, right, prior to jumping into Venezuela. I mean, whether or not that's true, imagine that.
Good favour, as it were. Get a good bit of press coverage on it. Oh, we're going to do this good thing domestically.
And then, boom, swipe in, grab a drug dealer. And you know, although I'm curious to see how much of that is actually true versus not. I think it might be a lot true, but I could be wrong. But yeah, we're gonna kind of reschedule a drug by as a smokescreen to go and take out a drug dealer, because that's it.
While also pardoning another international drug dealer.
Yeah.
It's. No, I think there's definitely something to you see it in the Daily Mail or even the Sun or whatever. Oh, cannabis skunk fucking man murders, cuts off his own dick or whatever. Like, that's a real extreme exaggeration, but you know what I mean? Like an insane story. And then the next page, new drug developed. And oh, look at these children that are alive today because of cannabis, this magical plant that's derived from da-da-da. It's all like bollocks, as in unscientific or whatever. But it's the juxtaposition of them. They need this thing, and what they're trying to inculcate into us and get us to accept as reality is that when they give us it good. Us produce it bad. You can't produce good, and if you're smoking that's bad. You're vaping it, that's good. Yours in a magic pot. Yeah.
What is inculcate?
Like inoculate, like through like a culture sort of, or through a thing. Like, I hate it when people call me out on language and I can't pull out a dictionary definition.
Okay, so it's a genuine word. You didn't misspeak.
No. I'm not misspeaking. It's a word that I can't give a strong definition for right now, but it's like to over time become, like through osmosis almost, become of the thing, be reshaped. I think it derives from medical, something like that. It'd be something that I read a lot of books from early 20th century. I'm going through a lot of Graham Greene at the minute. So yeah, my language might end up going a bit more archaic the more books I read from all the times. But yeah, basically just that over time, you become shaped by this thing without intention, really. Like there is an intent, an action onto you, but you're not kind of aware of it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I might actually stick a definition here later in editing.
Yeah, do that, mate. Do that. I don't really need.
I always forget I've got a computer in front of me.
I don't really need the word. I've already beaten Scrabble masters with 2-letter words. So I mean, at the end of the day,
instill an idea, attitude, or habit by persistent instruction.
Inculcate.
Oh, it's Kate, not gate. My accent is
inculcate.
Kate, yes. I'm adding a gate on it.
Right, okay, inculcate. Right. Go on, spell it.
Inculcate.
Excellent. How many letters?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. It's got both C's out of the Scrabble set.
Hey, that could, if anyone drops that up on Countdown in the next day or two, where it's obviously going to come up now that I've said it on YouTube. I don't know. It feels like a momentous time, like when I sussed out how to say the word nomenclature. Like, it took me months to be able to say that properly. Somebody's at the door. Mate, I think we're going to have to end this here.
We have to wrap up. We've always got more that we can discuss. Yeah, I suppose just quickly, we'll do another episode in sort of the coming months. Like I said, I'm back now. I've got a lot of episodes logged in. Just the last point, where can people keep up with your work? Where can people find you?
The Hemp Hound agency website is just about to be rebooted. Because it looks too nice, sparkly, and innocent, whereas that doesn't really reflect the place that I work in. So, yeah, www.hemphound.co.uk. You can check out there. You can also follow me on you. I'm thrown off now. LinkedIn and Facebook, either on my name as spelt there with Jones after there, which is spelt normally, or on the Hemp Hound agency.
Sweet. I'll include all the links below. I will let you get off and deal with your obligations. Say hi to the fam, and yeah, we'll get you back on very soon, brother.
All right, take care.
All right, peace and love. Bye. Well, there you go, folks. Sorry about the abrupt end to that. That is basically going to be part one. I'm recording, God, I think we have about 5 guests over the next week or two. Hey, buddy, you made your little debut on the podcast. Yeah. So I'll probably get back in somewhere around the end of March. I don't know what my calendar's looking like at the minute, but there's definitely more to discuss there with Kevin as always. And I think it was quite a good choice of guests to relaunch the podcast. And there's a lot of similarities that we're going through with systems around sort of like the Equality Act, around the FOIs, SARs, the Freedom of Information requests, subject access requests under the Freedom of Information Act 2000. And the Equality Act 2010. So these bits of legislation we're both using to try and uncover sort of, exclusionary practices, prejudice and discrimination that we've both faced, while effectively trying to, seek the truth and trying to do good for our sort of communities or the industries and the people that we represent. So I think good synergy there. Like I said, in part 2, we'll sort of hopefully have a bit more of an update between us both. With regard to sort of Albert Green, like I said, there's things happening at the minute that I cannot comment into the public record, unfortunately. Like I said, we are putting together sort of civil litigation against the council. I've been approved for funding for a legal challenge. Like I said, we are pushing through the ICO and others to challenge the council's sort of refusal to release information that is vital to our challenge towards the sale of the land. Like I said, there's other news there that I desperately want to kind of tell you about, but I can't until events pass, until time moves to such a time when I can actually reveal this information. Hopefully things will work out as we are sort of planning. I'm not sure, obviously it's down to luck at this point. We're hoping that the strategy that we've gone for is going to give us the best chance to secure the site and to secure the longevity of the project and the park, and allow us the opportunity to make material amendments to the site to start to make substantial changes to the space. We've kind of hit the limitations of what we can do without, affecting the contract of the space, and then potentially facing civil litigation ourselves from the council for even things of interpretations of criminal damage, etc. So we're in a difficult space with it right now. I'll keep you guys up to date as much as I can in the coming sort of weeks and episodes. Obviously, when we do sort of get final news and we know something, I might do either a solo episode, or I might try and rope in some of the other volunteers or whatever, and we'll do kind of a special about Albert Green and about the history of it, kind of what we're doing, what's kind of happened, and then our future for the future vision plans for the project. As well, who you want to see on the podcast. Like I said, I've already booked in, I think, the first 7 episodes at this point. And I'm reaching out to quite some ambitious guests, a lot of new guests. There'll be quite a few returning people because there's certain ongoing stories and narratives that I want to revisit. And I think it is important to sort of get on the record. But yeah, generally, it's good to be back. If you've made it this far, appreciate it. Appreciate you guys showing the love and support while I've been away as well. And yeah, if you like this, give us a like, a share, a thumbs up, a heart, whatever it is you do on your platform. Show appreciation. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. If you really like this, check us out on patreon.com/The Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a week, you can help me keep the lights on this little project of mine. Check out thesimpalife.com for back catalogue of kind of previous articles, information, links, etc. I will be updating the website at some point early this year. I'm just a bit still snowed under with other projects, but I am slowly getting back to it. Yeah, I guess there's one thing actually, a final point I kind of really wanted to make here, and I don't want it to be sort of morbid. I lost a close friend to suicide over Christmas, and I just wanted to kind of put out into the world a request. It sounds cliched, and cliches are cliches because they're true. For people to check on your friends, to be there for each other, to show some kindness, some compassion, and to be open to the suffering of others, as in acknowledging it, being aware of it, and being able to sit with somebody else in their suffering. Because it's when it bottles up and it compounds and it gets to a point where people feel lost, they feel hopeless. And the antithesis of that is connection and it's community. And each of us have that ability. And in reaching out to another, we don't just lessen their potential misery and loneliness, we lessen our own, and we build stronger bonds that protect us in what is increasingly seeming quite dark days these days. So, yeah, look after your people. Tell somebody you love them. Obviously, if you actually love them, don't just go up a stranger. Actually, fuck it, go up a stranger. Tell me you love them. Dare you. Fucking dare you. All right, I'm getting out of here. We'll be back next week with, I don't know, somebody. It'll be awesome. All right, you've been wonderful. I'll see you next week. Peace and love, folks.